Hi BookTube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. For today's Poetry Thursday, I'm going to do something a bit different. Instead of just reading one poem by a single poet, I'm going to be reading multiple poems from this, which is Fernando Pessoa and Co. Selected poems, which are edited and translated by Richard Zenith. And the and Co kind of comes in to service the fact that it's a selection of poems by Fernando Pessoa and his heteronyms. So these were sort of invented characters that kind of acted like alter egos for him as he was writing. But it's not just really a pen name, because he invented their entire lives and kind of really imagined their whole lives and personalities, and they would change over time like a real person. So yeah, it's a fascinating little book. So I'm going to give you selections from each of the three heteronyms in this selection, and then also a poem sort of penned under Pessoa's own name, just to give a taste of the book itself, a kind of almost like a review, but not quite. And so the three heteronyms are, so there's Alberto Sierra, then there's Ricardo Rice and Alvaro de Campos. I'm probably not pronouncing them right. And the first one, Alberto Sierra, we'll start off with, and he's more of a kind of a pastoral poet, but also kind of anti-pastoral poet. He doesn't really, he doesn't pretend that anything is anything more than it is. A thing can simply be as it really is, and that's sort of quite important for him. And so although there's lots of sort of natural imagery and stuff like that, it's quite unromantic. And here's a really short little poem by him, and it's called "This May Be the Last Day of My Life." This may be the last day of my life. I lifted my right hand to wave at the sun, but I did not wave at it in farewell. I showed how glad I was to still see it, that's all. So just a little taste of, I keep forgetting his name, Alberto Sierra, a kind of unromantic shepherd. And then the next one, Ricardo Rice, he's put down in the book as a sad Epicurean. He writes these odes in the style of Horace, and everything for him, he feels things and he tries to match them to a kind of ideal. But what kind of happens a lot with heteronyms in here is that they kind of, I feel they kind of break down a bit after a certain point, and they're kind of aware that they are maybe on one hand nothing, and on the other hand they're sort of everyone, they're multiple people, which is quite interesting to see. And I think Pessoa himself obviously does it a lot, but it feeds into the heteronyms every now and then, and so it kind of feeds into this here as well. So this is Ricardo Rice, and this is "Countless lives inhabit us." Countless lives inhabit us. I don't know when I think or feel who is thinking or feeling. I am merely the place where things are thought or felt. I have more than just one soul. There are more eyes than I myself. I exist, nevertheless, indifferent to them all. I silence them. I speak. The crossing urges of what I feel or do not feel struggle in who I am, but I ignore them. They dictate nothing to the I know. I write. So there we go. So there's a bit of Ricardo Rice. And then I think maybe the most famous of Fernando Pessoa's heteronyms is Alvaro de Campos. And he's a kind of bombastic, Walt Whitman-esque kind of poet. And he, this kind of character, he would travel around a lot, and he was quite restless. But then through his life, he kind of has this existential crisis. And so things start breaking down and getting a bit stranger and bleaker for him. And so this is kind of him in the middle of that process. He does kind of find, I don't know, a little bit of hope and meaning, but this is him just in the middle of this kind of emotional, existential whirlpool. And again, he's kind of making sense of it through travel, because that's what he's lived most of his life doing. So this is called Pack Your Bags for Nowhere at All. Pack your bags for nowhere at all. Set sail for the universal negation of everything, with a panoply of flags on make-believe ships. Those miniature, multicoloured ships from childhood. Pack your bags for the grand departure. And don't forget, along with your brushes and clippers, the polychrome distance of what can't be had. Pack your bags once and for all. Who are you here? Where you're gregarious and useless. And the more useful, the more useless. The more true to life, the less true to yourself. Who are you here? Who are you here? Who are you here? Set sail, even without bags, for your own diverse self. What does the inhabited world have to do with you? That kind of reminds me a bit, actually, that of The Ship of Death by D.H. Lawrence. But again, it's the hope isn't necessarily there yet. And then I've got a last one here under Fernando Pessoa's name. The interesting thing for Fernando Pessoa, because there's a little subtitle for every heteronym as you go through, and for Fernando Pessoa, the heteronym, or the little subtitle, is the mask behind the man. So kind of implying that even as Pessoa's writing under his own name, it's still a heteronym, it's still he's distancing his real self from the writing, and yet kind of expressing something of himself that he wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And this one is, there are a few really kind of short, haiku-esque poems in here. I think this, even though it's much longer than a haiku, it sort of reminds me of haiku in its sort of simple but contemplative mood. So it's called I Contemplate the Silent Pond. I contemplate the silent pond whose water is stirred by a breeze. Am I thinking about everything, or has everything forgotten me? The pond tells me nothing. I cannot feel the breeze. I don't know if I'm happy, nor if that's what I want to be. Smiling ripples that flutter in the water quietly sleeping. Why did I make my only life a life made only of dreams? So there we go, there's a taste of Fernando Pessoa and co. For me, I think actually the Pessoa poems are the strongest in here. I think there's quite a range there under his name. And with both Pessoa and De Campos, who's maybe my favourite of the heteronyms, there's some really great, quite strange, long poems, and I just didn't really want to get into them in a video like this. I'd really recommend it if you're looking to get a flavour for Pessoa. There's a kind of bleakness and a kind of oddness and eccentricity to him. But I think he does, there are some poems where he's striving for some kind of meaning or redemption or something. So it's interesting, it's complicated, it kind of contradicts itself, but it's a great little world to get into. So if you want to get a taste, I'd recommend this, or I think there are other selections of his poetry, before jumping into sort of the more famous work, The Book of Disquiet, which is a fair bit longer and I wouldn't necessarily say daunting, but it's just a lot, I suppose, to take in. So there we go, that's Fernando Pessoa and co. Please feel free to let me know what you thought, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.